order. To ensure the public safety and comply with the governor's safer at home order in response to COVID-19 virus, the Clearwater City Council will hold a public meeting today on Monday, May 4th, 2020 at 9 a.m. using communication media technology. Pursuant to Executive Order number 20-69 issued by the Office of Governor Ron DeSantis on March 20th, 2020, municipalities may conduct meetings of their governing boards without having a quorum of its members present physically or at any specific location, and utilize a communications media technology such as telephonic or video conferencing as provided by Section 120.545B2 Florida statutes. The meeting will be held through the Zoom platform and will be broadcast live on the city's website, www.myclearwater.com/government/council meeting streaming videos, on Facebook, www.facebook.com/City of Clearwater, and on YouTube, www.youtube.com/myclearwater, as well as the following public access TV channels: Spectrum Channel 638, Frontier Channel 30, and WOW Channel 15. Individuals with disabilities who need reasonable accommodations to effectively participate in this meeting are asked to contact the city clerk at 727-562-4092, that's 727-562-4092, or rosemary.call@myclearwater.com in advance. We will be using the same system this coming Thursday for the city council meeting. With that, I will turn it over to the city manager for item 2.1, review of sustainability progress and programs. Mr. Horn.
Thank you, Mayor. Good morning, Council. Sheridan Ball is going to review sustainability progress and programs. Ms. Ball.
Boyle, Sustainability Coordinator. Can you all hear me?
Yes.
Okay, great. So I'd like to take some time this morning to review the city's second completed greenhouse gas inventory, as well as a few potential programs. As you might recall, the city first calculated its greenhouse gas emissions in 2010 based on data from 2007. This inventory included emissions from our entire community, including residential, commercial, industrial, and municipal sectors. Initially, our total emission level was calculated at 1.25 million metric tons of carbon dioxide equivalents. However, our knowledge of greenhouse gases and how they manifest and interact in the atmosphere has advanced in the last 10 years. Because of this, and the need to have a baseline inventory that can be accurately compared to future inventories, it was necessary to recalculate our first inventory in order to be consistent with the current local government operations protocol and the U.S. Community Protocol for Inventories. This process was fairly simple, as all of the data was already available and could be plugged into the inventory calculator provided by ICLEI Local Governments for Sustainability. So using the new protocol, citywide greenhouse gas emissions totaled 1.29 million metric tons of carbon dioxide equivalents for the calendar year 2007. Emissions from energy consumption and transportation fuels were the largest contributors to the citywide greenhouse gas inventory at 65% and 30% respectively. Solid waste contributed 5%, while the city's wastewater operations accounted for 0.1% of emissions. And I wanted to mention that the emissions from the city's potable water supply, so the water we pump to the city and then to the individual properties, that's included in the energy consumption portion here, as the electricity used to pump the water is part of our municipal energy consumption. So from this inventory, Clearwater Greenprint was formed as a plan to help the city achieve these two goals. First, we wanted to reduce citywide greenhouse gas emissions 10% below 2007 levels by the year 2020. And second, we wanted to reduce citywide greenhouse gas emissions 25% below our 2007 levels by the year 2035. So we have come a long way since 2010, and in order to see if the city and the Clearwater community would be successful in reaching its goal for the year 2020, a second greenhouse gas inventory was conducted in 2019 based off of data from the previous year. According to the inventory, the community-wide greenhouse gas emissions for 2018 were 1.13 million metric tons of carbon dioxide equivalents, and that is 12.9% below our 2007 levels. So together we achieved our first goal of reducing emissions by over 10%. From this pie chart, you can see that our emissions from energy consumption decreased since 2007 from 65% to 59% of the total inventory. Emissions from transportation fuels, on the other hand, increased 8%. On a smaller but still significant note, our emissions from solid waste decreased 2%, and our very small contribution from wastewater stayed about the same. In understanding these differences, it's important to note that we've also increased in population. According to the US Census, we went from a population of just over 110,000 in 2007 to a population of 116,000 roughly in 2018. Despite our increase in population, our community still managed to significantly decrease emissions from energy. There are a few factors that have made that decrease possible. So there are now more efficient appliances, such as those with an Energy Star label, now widely available on the market. There has been a slight increase in renewable energy and a decrease in fossil fuel energy from Duke Energy's portfolio. In 2007, 65% of what was then Progress Energy's portfolio came from coal, gas, and oil, while now only 61.7% come from these fossil fuels. More solar panel systems have also been installed on buildings within Clearwater. For instance, just since 2015, over 557 systems have been installed, resulting in a total production of almost 7 million kilowatt hours and saving roughly 5,000 metric tons of carbon dioxide each year. And I wanted to thank our local Suncoast Sierra Club chapter for gathering that information. There has also been an increase in natural gas being used by our commercial facilities within Clearwater. While still primarily methane, upon combustion, we see less emissions from natural gas compared to the electricity that comes from coal and other types of fuel, such as diesel and traditional gasoline. There have been new additions to the Florida Energy Code, and this has resulted in more efficient building standards. And finally, we can also just see a greater awareness among consumers about the need to conserve energy, so turning off the lights when they leave buildings, as well as the economic and environmental benefits of doing so. Now, when we look to our emissions from transportation, we see that they've increased since 2007. This increase also only comes from our passenger vehicles, so personal vehicles and smaller vehicles used for traveling to and from work, while we actually have a slight decrease in emissions from our larger freight trucks. This increase in emissions is occurring even despite having more fuel-efficient vehicles on the road. When I saw this increase, I wanted to know why, if it was simply just a result of our increased population, or if we were also just driving more. So I calculated the growth rates, and as you can see, the growth rate of our population was 0.005. And if we look at the annual number of miles passenger vehicles traveled within Clearwater, we see not only an increase, but a growth rate of 0.022, surpassing the growth rate of our population. So in addition to increasing the number of vehicles on the road due to an increased population, we may also just be driving more than we previously did. Besides that, we've met our first goal, and the question then turns to how we will continue to succeed in reaching our 25% reduction by 2035 goal. Reaching this goal will require ongoing commitment, possibly even more than we've done in the last 10 years. This is because many of the somewhat easier strategies have either been completed or started, and now we must look towards starting with strategies that we are either less familiar with or that require greater attention or upfront investment. And looking even further into the future, I would encourage that we begin setting a goal for 2050 and look towards some of our neighboring communities for commitment examples. Many cities are aligning with the recommendations provided by the Paris Climate Agreement and the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, which state that we will need to see an 80% reduction in global emissions by 2050 in order to stay under 2 degrees of global temperature increase. For instance, the city of St. Petersburg has a goal of 80% reduction by 2050, and the cities of Orlando and Miami strive to have 100% reduction, essentially becoming net zero by that same year. But while we are still focusing on 2035, we have a few programs that we'd like to either start or explore in the near future to continue progressing. As you've seen, we cannot discuss emission reduction goals without discussing both energy and transportation. As for energy, increasing energy efficiency throughout our community is one of the greatest things we can continue to do to reduce emissions. We've made a lot of progress by converting our streetlights to LED bulbs, by entering into a performance-based contract with Honeywell for more efficient equipment, and installing things like motion sensors in our buildings and so on. To further energy savings within city facilities, we are looking to start an energy savings program in which a third-party company will work with the city to train staff and monitor energy use within buildings in order to reduce that energy use. The idea for this program came from the Pinellas County School Board, which partnered with a company to focus on behavior change and optimal building use. The program required no upfront costs, and the third-party company is paid only from a portion of the savings that results. For the school board, that meant a 20% reduction in their energy use over the last 5 years, totaling a savings of over $20 million. We issued a request for proposals for a similarly structured program last February and have received proposals. Due to the recent social distancing recommendations, the committee has not yet been able to meet to review these proposals, but we will do so once it's safe to meet once again. In other energy efficiency updates, we have PACE financing, or Property Assessed Clean Energy Financing. This is a mechanism for financing energy efficiency and renewable energy improvements on private property. It allows the property owner to finance the upfront costs of energy or other eligible improvements on a property and then pay the cost back over time through a voluntary assessment. The unique characteristic of PACE assessments is that they are attached to the property rather than an individual and are paid through the property tax. Pinellas County has approved PACE for only commercial properties at this time and has entered into an interlocal government agreement with Counterpoint Energy Solutions. Our CRA team has begun working with this company to make sure our local businesses are aware of the opportunity, and I believe a few property owners have already pursued this program. In addition to using less energy, we should also look to increase renewable energy options. Living in the Sunshine State means solar is our top renewable energy option. As I mentioned earlier, when discussing the greenhouse gas inventory, solar systems have been increasing in Clearwater, and we hope to help them increase further. In addition to emission reduction, the Clearwater Greenprint Plan also prioritizes strategies that have economic benefits, including job creation. Solar energy has continued growing as an industry globally and locally. In fact, Pinellas County now ranks as the second in the state for the most jobs created by the solar energy industry, with only Palm Beach County outranking us. Solar United Neighbors is a nonprofit organization that works to facilitate solar co-ops. This process allows interested residents to get together and, under the guidance of Solar United Neighbors, create an RFP for a solar installer. Next, they select an installer through a committee and then proceed one by one with the installation. Co-op participants receive a large price reduction due to ordering in bulk. We would like to establish a partnership with this organization to promote the formation of co-op and bulk purchases as a way to make solar more accessible to residents. Duke has also created a solar program called the Clean Energy Connection and will be filing for approval from the Florida Public Service Commission shortly. If approved and construction is on time, the program has a tentative start year of 2022. The Renewable Energy Program would enable qualified businesses and residential customers to participate in a community solar program and directly fund the development of several utility-owned solar plants. 10% of this program has been carved out to allow for municipal enrollment. How it works is that the program participants subscribe to kilowatts from Duke's solar systems for a fixed monthly subscription fee, and it's added to your monthly bill. This fee supports the operations of these solar facilities. If we enrolled, we would decide how much of the city's total energy usage would come from the solar program, possibly even having the ability to subscribe to enough solar generation to match our annual energy use. The power generated by the solar facilities feeds into the Duke Energy electric grid across Florida, and we would receive a monthly bill credit associated with the amount of solar energy our share produces. The initial credit rate for the first 3 years of the program will be 0.037 cents per kilowatt hour, and then the rate will increase 1.5% every year. So what this means is during the first few years, there is a monthly net charge. However, the bill credit amount increases each year, and in roughly 3 to 5 years, our annual credits are projected to exceed annual costs. After 5 to 7 years, the total credits are expected to exceed total costs, and from that point on, Duke states that we should anticipate an ongoing annual savings. The program's enrollment window lasts until August 31st, and if this is something we would be interested in pursuing, I would be happy to return to council to provide a variety of subscription levels and what that would look like financially. I think it's a great way to incorporate solar as an energy source right now without taking on a large upfront cost, as would be required by installing our own systems on city property. Similar to energy, strategies involving transportation require reduction and alternatives. Reduction means decreasing the amount of driving we either do out of necessity or leisure. Good, okay. The previous council approved the Complete Streets implementation plan, which was an excellent step. Other things we can consider include what's known as EV-ready policies and building codes, which establish EV or electric vehicle infrastructure requirements for new construction projects, including the electrical capacity and pre-wiring. This doesn't mean every building would need to have a charging station, but it would make the future installation of EV charging stations very easy. We could also consider a green fleet policy, which can establish goals for including electric vehicles into our fleet and set standards for idling and other practices that might be unnecessarily contributing to fuel use. In terms of our city vehicles specifically, first, a congratulations to our fleet team for once again being recognized as one of the top 100 fleets in the nation. As you might recall, 9 hybrid Ford Explorers were recently ordered for our police patrol. We're hoping they're well received by our police department, and I believe 11 more have been ordered or are on the list for our public utilities department. I, as well as our fleet manager, Perry Conzen, have been on frequent calls with the Electric Vehicle Collaborative, offered through our participation with the Climate Mayors Group to discuss also incorporating electric vehicles in the future. Duke also has a program in which it will cover the cost of installation for electric vehicle charging stations until 2022. Our community has taken advantage of this offering, and we have had several chargers installed on private commercial properties under this program. We are also working with Duke to get 2 charging stations installed at our beach library and recreation center at the moment. Of course, there are other sectors beyond energy and transportation that are vital to creating a sustainable community. We will also be pursuing programs related to other Clearwater Greenprint categories, such as water consumption and conservation, waste reduction, green businesses, local food, and so on. For instance, we are hosting a virtual discussion this evening about the many benefits of composting, and that information is available on the city's Facebook as well as the calendar on our city website. We will also be offering a residential compost workshop series this summer, in which residents who live in Clearwater can attend and leave with their own compost bin. A big thank you to both solid waste and public utilities for helping to make this program possible. And finally, we recently announced the creation of the Pinellas Sustainability and Resiliency Network. This group was formed out of the understanding that climate change and other environmental stressors do not abide by city boundaries, and it will take a regional approach with active communication among the many cities within Pinellas County to create a more sustainable future for all. So thank you, and I would be happy to answer any questions or elaborate.
Thank you, Ms. Boyle. Any questions from the council? Please unmute. I see Councilmember Beckman. You need to unmute. Thank you.
Yeah, okay. Hi, Sheridan.
Hi, good morning.
Good morning. It's nice to see you. I'm so excited you gave this update. You know, environment and sustainability is near and dear to my heart. So I went through your PowerPoint presentation and just have a few questions. I don't know if we can start back at like the first couple of slides or how you want to do that. But I have a question about when the slide that says energy emissions and it's got those bar graphs.
Yes.
You know, why are those so similar in their reductions? You know, that seems kind of, you know, it just seems to me, I'd like to have a better understanding of why that's such a uniform reduction and how can you actually determine what the reduction is per category, you know, for residential versus municipal.
I can provide you with that, and what I can do is I can download the inventory report and go really into the specifics on each category. Are you mentioning the similarity between our commercial and our residential sectors right there?
Yeah. that in particular?
Yeah, I can dissect that further for you, but I think it's specifically because a lot of those factors that I mentioned affect both our commercial and residential sectors. The only difference is that we do see, in compared to 2007, our commercial businesses have increased greater in their natural gas consumption versus our residential sectors. But for both sectors, I mean, our appliances are just getting far more efficient. Duke Energy both provides for all of those sectors. And so even though it's only a slight decrease in fossil fuels in their energy portfolio, it actually made a huge difference. Only that I think it was 65 to 61.7% coming from fossil fuels.
Okay. So is that more like from steps that Duke took, like if they've closed a coal plant and stuff, that's why it's kind of a uniform reduction there?
Correct. Yeah, they either decreased their fossil fuels and increased either renewable energy options or nuclear.
Okay, because I'm thinking it's not a whole lot of individual people doing, you know, our city and our residential are doing individual things.
Yeah, I would agree. And I would say that I do think people are more aware now. So, you know, we want to turn off the lights when we leave. Does that have the greatest effect if every single person is doing it? Absolutely. But I think we, in this graph, can see the power that our utility has on our emissions.
Absolutely. And then the next slide after that, the transportation emissions. And
yes.
So you had, you know, there's some alarming things with, we have an increase in the number of people in Clearwater, and they seem to be driving more, even with more fuel efficiencies. And so I was wondering if there's a way we can incentivize people to drive EVs or purchase EVs, drive EVs. Can we have some more charging stations on our city property? Can we incentivize our workers, our city workers? You know, maybe they get primo parking, or maybe there's some parking incentives in different rec centers around the beach if you're driving an electric vehicle.
Yeah, I think we can absolutely look into that. I think electric vehicles in themselves kind of have an incentive, right? Because they're so modern and contrary to the popular belief, they're pretty affordable, even when you buy used. And we were really excited to partner with the Southern Alliance for Clean Energy to do a test drive, an electric vehicle day. Unfortunately, that was canceled because it was supposed to happen this past month. But once things are a little more back to normal, we are going to reschedule that. Okay. And we hope just by exposure and being able to test drive a great vehicle, people will also want to purchase one at their next opportunity.
Okay. Do we have how many EV stations charging stations do we have on city property?
On city property, I believe 2. One is in the Garden Avenue garage, and then the other one, I know it was at the former Countryside Library. I'm not sure if it's been moved over to the new location. And then we would have, the third location will be the Beach Rec Center and Library. And at that facility, we will be having 2, a level 2 charger, which charges a little slower, and then a fast level charging station.
Great, that's fantastic. That's good. The next slide is the one on energy efficiency updates. And so this is where you're talking about getting some RFPs from different third parties that come in and help municipalities, or for example, our school district save money with behavioral changes. Mm-hmm. So you said there's already something that's being evaluated and you've sent out an RFP for that?
Yes, we did issue an RFP in February and we have received responses. We just have to get together as a committee to review those responses and then select a company to partner with.
Okay. Do we as a city council get any kind of presentation on what those companies can do for us? Or is it only a presentation after you've decided which one you want to go with?
I would ask the city manager. I'm not sure on that process.
What is your focus, Councilmember Beckman?
Like, so if Ms. Boyle has put out the city's put out an RFP for these different third parties that will come and help a municipality save significant money related to energy, Do we, as a city council, get a presentation of that proposal?
Typically, you would not. I mean, that's why you have staff. Staff's role is to evaluate and then make recommendations.
Mhm.
However, that's public information, so we can certainly give you copies of what those submitters have given us. If there's something in there that you feel like you think would benefit the council and you want us to give a presentation, typically during a work session, then that's something that we can pursue.
Okay. I just think it's a good idea because it's such a positive. There's so much opportunity for savings that I think it's a great educational opportunity for our residents to really hear the pitch. It's just an idea. And then on the next slide, on the renewable energy updates. So we have no city building with solar. Is that correct?
To my knowledge, yes, that's correct.
Okay. Do you have any update? A couple of years ago, I had asked if, I think the North Greenwood Rec Center was getting a new roof, and I had asked if there was a solar quote. Do you have any updates on how that went?
I don't have an update since I think you probably looked into the report. I know it had a long return on investment period, and the price tag was fairly large. I'm not sure if we've looked into another solar array, but if the return on investment was the barrier, that's why I think Duke Energy's program is a step in the right direction until we're ready to make that commitment.
Okay. Okay. And I went and talked to that solar provider, and it seems like there are different requirements for cities, but I was a little concerned that there was only one quote for that building and not, a traditional three. So I think, and also in looking at I always get this wrong, so I wrote it on my notes, the solid waste transfer station that's out there near US 19 that just was built. It's out in the middle of nowhere. It's got all this sun beating down on it. It seems like a perfect location to have solar. And it's so new. I would love for the city to investigate the possibility of making that work financially.
I can speak further with the director, and we'll see what we can do for that area.
Okay. And then I hate to dominate the transportation slide, which is the next one. So you had mentioned, that we're looking, the fleet department is doing great with ordering these electric vehicles. So it's this Ford Interceptor, is that correct?
And they're hybrid. I do want to clarify that. So they're not
Okay.
the plug-in electric, but they are the dual battery there.
Okay.
I have, what do I have? Let's see here. I just spoke with Perry about it. Hybrid Ford Explorers.
Okay, so it's a plug-in hybrid? It'll be
not.
Oh, it is not a plug-in hybrid?
It's not a plug-in hybrid. I know we've been doing some explorations and just what's possible for the future together. I know our fleet manager has spoken recently with the fleet manager in St. Pete, and they really liked their Nissan Leaf specifically because they didn't need a charging station for it. They could just plug it directly into an outlet that was already available in the building. That was kind of eye-opening for us because one thing we've been discussing is when you have more electric vehicles, either in a fleet or just in a city, you need to have the charging stations to accommodate them. And it's like a chicken or the egg scenario, what comes first? But thankfully with this Nissan Leaf scenario, we realized we can try it out without having a major piece of equipment to install beforehand.
You can have a 110. I had a Leaf originally for a while. Now I've got Chevrolets. And then on the, also, when we're talking about complete streets and really reducing the number of cars on the road to try to, reduce our emissions, there's been some back and forth emails recently about people really appreciating the number of cars off the street. So because of COVID-19, and we're able to ride our bikes a lot more freely, especially around the beach. Coronado and North Beach and stuff. And so I'm just wondering, can we pursue expanding our bike lanes in the city to really encourage that? And what are we doing to do that?
Yeah, I would probably turn, and I can find out more from our planning and development department, because they're kind of in control of that process, the complete street process. But I do know when it comes to complete streets, like it looks to making roads more friendly and accessible to multiple modes of transportation, not just primarily vehicles, which we are heavily now. I know Greenprint has a challenge that we haven't yet attempted, which is like a mile reduction challenge. And it's something like a fun program we would put out for our residents. And somehow they would track online when they're reducing their mileage, and somehow we can either have a fun program or incentivize that somehow. It's not something that we've started yet, but I definitely think it's going, transportation is currently one of the hardest things regionally for us to tackle because we're a built out community. And it's going to take some creative and fun strategies like that to see the decrease.
Absolutely. Public transportation, all that. Yeah. And then I think, oh, the additional updates. I think this is your last slide. So are you in communication with our environmental advisory board? Do you play a role with them? So that's a group of people that are, passionate about the environment and working to make progress in Clearwater. So are you working with them at all?
If they request information, I happily provide it and I can discuss things with them then, but I primarily work through their city liaison, which is Sarah Kessler, to provide them with information or attend meetings.
Okay. And then one last question. When you're talking about us setting goals and we need some more significant strategies, how do we compare with our surrounding municipalities as far as what we're doing related to sustainability?
So we see a variety of goals. I think with our neighbors, some have the greenhouse gas emission reduction goals, like I mentioned. So St. Pete has that, and that's 80% by 2050, Orlando, Miami. As for our other communities in Pinellas County, I've seen more renewable energy goals than I have greenhouse gas reduction goals. I'm not sure really why that is, but I think it might be that they just haven't conducted a greenhouse gas inventory, right? So you can't change what you haven't measured. So it might be easier, and it just might be more of a priority for them to say, we're going to focus on a certain percentage of renewable energy by this year. And directly that does affect greenhouse gases. So, and I on that effort, I mean, you would see, I think, Largo, St. Pete, Dunedin, Safety Harbor have all set the 100% renewable energy goal.
Do you think that's something we should do?
I would ask you all.
Okay. I think it is. I think it's something we should do.
Yeah, if I can make one comment, Councilmember Beck, when goal setting, as we started out with Greenprint as a partnership effort between the staff and the council. And so I think Sheridan's response to you, I think was very appropriate, is that we can certainly identify, goals that we think might be appropriate and good for us. But we would bring those goals to you to see how interested you are in achieving some of those. So don't necessarily expect us to leapfrog out there on goals without first coming and talking and getting a consensus from the council as to how aggressive you want to pursue some of these things.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Sharon, for answering my questions. I appreciate that.
Councilmember Hamilton, you had some questions?
Yeah, Sheridan,
Mr. Albrecht next.
During your presentation, and I appreciate it, I was a little surprised there was never no mention of our Clearwater gas system and our natural gas conversion of many of our commercial fleet in the city, and what contribution that makes to the transportation. I'm assuming on the freight side of the transportation emissions, because that is where it went down. Am I correct in that assumption?
I'm not sure. It's a little more difficult to quantify when it comes to our vehicle miles traveled. All the information I got was from the Florida Department of Transportation, and it's just bulk amounts of information. And the only dissection they can provide is passenger vehicles versus freight. So the amount of like solid waste vehicles that we have that are running on natural gas, as well as the private sector industries that are running using that fuel, it could be resulting in that decrease for our freight. I just haven't been able to pinpoint it specifically.
Well, like I said, given the number of houses, many houses are converting to natural gas for their heating and their cooking uses. As someone who owns a commercial kitchen, I prefer to cook on natural gas. Electric just doesn't cut it for me. But that's why, you know, we need to maintain that forward movement, because it is a better, cleaner option than electricity. However, you know, the transportation that Councilmember Beckman brought up with bicycles, I think part of our problem is we're the most densely populated county in the state. We're also the #1 beach destination in the country. And given those numbers, while I want to encourage bicycle riding, when you have that many cars on the road and vehicles on the road, you've got that many more opportunities for conflict between bicyclists and cars. So safety is also a concern. Just increasing bicycle paths and making it easier for bicyclists is going to create in my mind, a certain level of frustration for cars, and then some drivers become a little more aggressive and can cause more problems. So that's a very delicate balance that we have to keep focused on.
Councilmember Albritton. If you could unmute, sir.
Okay.
Thank you.
I couldn't get my hand up fast enough, Ms. Beckman, and she pretty much touched on a lot of points I wanted to talk about. So thank you, Kathleen, on that. But I do want to tell Sheraton that I really, really am glad that the city has employed you and you're on board with us now. I know when you first came on, we did talk about the solar array on top of the rec center when we were talking about doing a re-roof on that. The other thing that I wanted to talk about was charging stations, because we are doing a shift over to more electric cars. So I'm glad to hear we're getting one on the beach, but I think that's definitely something in the plans that we should be planning for in the future as we really go from fossil fuel to electric. And then the only other thing I wanted to say was when we start talking about Imagine Clearwater, I want to make sure that we're talking about green certifications for any of the projects that are there. So do want to have a discussion with you as we get ideas and proposals in on that. Okay. That's it.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Albritton. Councilmember Bunker. You're muted, sir.
I'm trying. Oh,
all right.
Oh. You're muted again.
I'm unmuting and then you are as well. So there we go. Just one quick two-part question. What was the bid on the rec center roof, and how long would it have taken to gain a profit from having an electric solar panels there?
So I'm not sure on the specific dollar sign amount. We do have the Director of General Services here. Earl, do you remember? I can get that information for you. I do believe that the return on investment was something like a 17-year period. But I can get that information for you.
Okay, I appreciate that.
And if I could just make one comment, especially for the benefit of new council members, is that when the council or the commission at the time indicated that they wanted to pursue environmental measures, and we started with converting our fleet, it was very clear, they made it very clear that we will evaluate return on investment payback periods. So that has always been a part of the evaluation. And where the payback was not perceived to be a reasonable payback, then we did not pursue it. So I just want everybody to know that the payback has always been one element of that. And if you think that payback is not an issue, and you want to make that investment, then you'll have an opportunity to tell us if that's what you want to do.
Fair enough.
Councilmember Albritton.
Yeah, just to comment on that, I looked into solar on my house a year ago, and I had so many different quotes. And what I found out as delving into it, the ROI is different on all of it. And they try to push you into programs that, they pay for the solar. I really wanted to just buy it out and then return it to the grid. And then over time, you have a faster ROI. But what I noticed was a lot of the companies, the technology is changing so fast. One company would come in and say, our panels can give you this much energy. And then another company said, well, ours can give you twice as much. So I think that we'll see a little bit more of things come into use as the technology changes in the next couple of years. I think the cost will come down and the ROI will hit that faster. So just wanted to make that comment.
Very good. Thank you. Ms. Boyle, I do have a couple more questions, which is hard to believe after 41 minutes. But have we done any studies on how often the charging stations, and you may not have this answer, are actually being used? I have been in the Garden Street garage for over 3 years. It is seldom that I see a car being charged there. I don't know if Councilmember Beckman charges outside of her house very often. Most of the people that I know who own Teslas and other EV vehicles, they generally don't go long distances in that car, and they seem to charge at home. So what I want to make certain of is that if we put them in neighborhood type settings, that they're actually going to get used. And I'd like some data behind that, not just a stab in the dark.
I don't have a specific study related to the Garden Avenue charging station. I will say anecdotally, I don't think it is used very frequently. I also just don't think people know of it. So we could do a better job of advertising that charging station. As we see more like IT or technology related companies have an interest in Clearwater, I do think we'll see that demand increase. Just working next to the Novi 4 building, I see a number of Teslas come through. So I think we could do a better job of advertising that. And the mayor does speak to something called range anxiety. So one of the biggest barriers to electric vehicles for folks is the range anxiety. They want to know that they're going to be able to charge when they go somewhere, whether it's the grocery store, at home, or on their way to their family member's house. So it is a little bit of the chicken or the egg scenario. Is sometimes what's preventing people from buying electric vehicles is knowing that there are charging stations available. And then we don't want to have the charging stations available until we know people have electric vehicles.
On that PACE program that you mentioned, is there an interest rate associated with paying over time?
There is. I can get that for you. I have been told it's very low.
Okay, so it's probably subsidized in some way.
Possibly.
Okay. With all of the bar graphs, I would appreciate if we actually had numbers on those, because some of them are so slight. I'd like a raw number and a percentage so that I can actually compare.
A raw number of like the emissions or of the vehicle miles?
On almost all of these graphs.
Okay.
I mean, I'm a numbers person, so it's helpful for me. I mean, I can see increases or decreases, but I don't know the actual quantity, and I'd like to have that. When we first did Greenprint, which some people have criticized, we really did do quite a bit of analysis, as Mr. Horn said, on what the cost benefit was. And we set some parameters on things that we thought were really going to have the greatest bang for the buck. So ultimately, I think we do need to set specific goals, measure those goals so that we can see how we're doing, and also get some tangible numbers on what we believe the ROI is going to be. And I'd like to do that. I can tell you Ruth Eckerd Hall, which is a city-owned building, for those who don't know, it is going to be replacing their roof. And when we reached out to Duke to see if they would be interested in doing a solar program, because the roof is massive, and it is not blocked by trees, it's really in the perfect spot for orientation. They were not interested in working with us on that. So if you're looking for a program within the city on a city building, that is a roof that's going to be replaced in the very near future and has a lot of square footage. So just something for everybody to think about. Anything else on this item?
I do.
Okay.
I just wanted to respond or chime in with Sheridan's comments about the EV stations, charging stations. And I will say, I have used the one in the Garden Street garage once with, I don't have a Tesla, I have a Chevy Volt and a Bolt that I enjoy driving. Our range on the Chevy Bolt is over 300 miles. We can plug it into a 110 charger, but where we go most frequently is to Largo Central Park because they have a fast charger. You plug it in, you're looking at the playground, you get to see all the kids playing, you get to walk around the park, you can walk over to the library. So I think the key thing is, you know, to put it in a central location where people are going to use it. I would bet that those ones located at the beach are really going to be used quite a bit. St. Pete has them down by Central Avenue. People are using them frequently. And, you know, you go in and plug it in. I can plug it in for, you know, 20 minutes and get 80 miles or so. And it's free right now. And so those municipalities are starting them free to get people to use them and know that they're there, and that's certainly an incentive to have something free. And then I anticipate as people buy more EV vehicles, they'll start charging, and that's absolutely reasonable. I mean, I've paid for my electric charge when I take my car across the state. And you simply use an app on your phone and you chart out where the chargers are. You pull into a Dunkin' Donuts, you get some coffee, you charge it for 25 minutes, and then you keep going. So there is a little anxiety. I know that's why I have a Volt, which is a plug-in hybrid as well. If I've got to drive up to Michigan or the Carolinas, you know, I'll take that hybrid, but you do need to locate them where people are. And it can't just be in a garage that a lot of people don't even know there's a Garden Street garage, let alone one charger in there.
Councilmember Bunker.
Oh, okay.
Go ahead.
Well, I had one other thing is that I applaud our fleet transitioning from diesel to natural gas, but natural gas is not clean. It's cleaner, but it's not clean. And I do appreciate Mr. Hamilton's comments about cooking with gas. I love to cook with gas, cast iron skillets, but an induction stovetop is also pretty impressive. And it's also impressively expensive, but it's a good alternative.
Councilmember Bunker.
Yes, I just wanted to say what an inspiration Kathleen was to me on the campaign trail, listening to her personal experiences, how solar has helped her save an enormous amount of money at her home. And I decided to swap out my Ford Fusion hybrid for a used Prius hybrid, getting such great gas mileage from that. One little tip in case anyone from the Trump administration is watching. I've never understood why we don't do a partnership with somebody like McDonald's, because you know you're always going to have a McDonald's nearby. So if the government could have charging stations there, you know, you could stop in and have a coffee and some horrible, horrible, unhealthy food.
I think that's a difficult trade-off. We'd improve the environment, but increase obesity. So. All right, we're going to move on to item 3.1.
Thank you, Mayor. Approve the substantial amendment to the City of Clearwater's 2019-2020 Annual Action Plan to reallocate unencumbered funding and to budget for additional funding provided by the United States Department of Housing and Urban Development to address needs resulting from the COVID-19 emergency. Mr. Lane.
Thank you, Chuck Lane, Assistant Director, Economic Development and Housing Department. The $2 trillion CARES package that President Trump recently signed into law included an allocation of $3 billion in Community Development Block Grant Program money to be distributed by the same formula used to distribute CDBG annual allocations to local governments. The city received $492,592 in this special allocation. This money is intended to prepare for, respond to, and recover from the COVID-19 crisis. For us to push out this money, we need to complete what is called a substantial amendment to the city's annual action plan. Every 5 years, the city prepares a consolidated plan identifying the goals and objectives for the use of federal funds over the life of the plan. Those federal funds are Home Investment Partnership Program funding and CDBG. We also complete an annual action plan identifying activities and projects that are consistent with that consolidated plan. The annual action plan also includes a budget. Including this additional CDBG money into the annual action plan's budget is specifically the reason triggering the requirement for the substantial amendment. In addition to this special allocation, we will be programming unencumbered current year funds to address the crisis as well. So I'd like to give you an overview of the three primary activities we are creating with these federal funds in response to COVID-19. One, CDBG regulations always limit expenditures on public services to 15% of a given year's allocation. In the current year, our allocation is $764,043. So our public service cap this year is $114,606. All of those funds are accounted for. HUD has eliminated the public service cap to allow additional spending on public services. We're planning to reprogram $131,000 for public service organizations whose work helps people respond to the crisis. So we plan to contract with some of our partners that we think can help people respond to the crisis. Secondly, we will provide rent, mortgage, and utility payment assistance to qualifying Clearwater residents that do not qualify for Pinellas County's program. The county's program will serve qualifying Clearwater residents, unincorporated and incorporated. They estimate spending about $75 million on this program countywide. Our pot of money is much smaller. We have about $300,000 in State Housing Initiative Partnership Program funding, and we're budgeting another $300,000 from Home Investment Partnership Program funding, which of course is HUD, for a total project budget of $600,000. We'll manage the program until the funds are depleted. Pinellas County's program serves households up to 200% of the poverty rate. That's roughly a little bit less than 50% of area median income. This is a very low income bracket. Income qualifications for the city's program will be those households whose income is too high for the county's program, up to 80% of area median income. We realize that there's a lot of folks out there that are over that 80% level that need assistance as well. But as you know, our programs, which are funded by these restrictive dollars, are intended to serve low to moderate income people. Grants will provide for up to $4,000 for up to 3 months back rent, mortgage, and past due utility payments. Payments for unpaid expenses prior to April will not be eligible. Lastly, in a few moments, Denise Sanderson will present our proposed Clearwater Back to Business program. Denise will go into further detail on it, but in simple terms, it's a grant and technical assistance program. Qualifying home-based businesses will be eligible for up to $2,000 in grant funding, and qualifying brick and mortar businesses may be eligible for $5,000 in grant funding and up to $1,000 in technical assistance. CDBG will be used to fund a portion of this program. We have current CDBG agreements with Prospera and Tampa Bay Black Business Investment Corporation. They currently provide technical assistance under our CDBG Micro Enterprise program. Economic Development and Housing staff will perform the initial screening of applicants to determine eligibility. Prospera and Tampa Bay Black Business Investment Corporation will conduct a deeper screening to determine what types of technical assistance are best suited for each business. Technical services include legal services, accounting services, marketing guidance, and general business assistance. The annual action plan amendment budgets CDBG funding in the amount of $394,074 towards grants and technical assistance, an additional $98,518 to cover administrative costs. Concludes my presentation. I'll take any questions, please.
Any questions? Councilmember Beckman.
Yeah, I have a question, Mr. Lane, about, so there are two different programs that you just mentioned. The one that Ms. Sanderson's gonna discuss in more detail in a few minutes, correct?
Right.
And then you've got this one. And when I looked at the graph, there's a home emergency rent mortgage utilities assistance. It's a new project, and it should, we have 300,000 allocated for that. And I just was wondering, how are our residents going to receive that, that assistance? And what's the process for them getting some of that $300,000? What does that look like?
We're using $300,000 in SHIP money, state money, and another $300,000 in home. So it's total of $600,000. We will, if approved on Thursday, we hope to on Monday have an application available for people to apply online for that funding.
Okay. And it's a first come, first serve?
First come, first serve.
Okay. Okay.
Other questions? Chuck, as staff was going through this, are there any things that gave you pause that we're going to be sacrificing as we shift this money? I mean, it's all about triaging and prioritizing, but I mean, was there anything that gnaws at you that you say down the road, we're not going to be able to do X, Y, and Z because we are shifting these dollars?
Well, using the CDBG money, that of course is intended for this. That's the emergency allocation that we got. So there's no alternative use of those funds. So that works. As far as the SHIP and the home money, any money we use towards this crisis from those funds is money that won't be used towards housing projects in the future. Thankfully, we received a much higher allocation in SHIP for the coming year. So that'll help offset that will more than offset what we're spending. So yeah, it's a bit concerning, and we have to keep an eye on the money we're moving out of housing into these programs, but the need's there, so we're addressing them.
And I'll be supporting this on Thursday, but I do want people to understand who are watching, this is a no-sum game. So when you move money, you know, you are going to be sacrificing something else. So thank you for that insight. Any other questions? Item 3.2. Mr. Horn, you're on mute.
Sorry.
No problem.
Endorse the application for the Project Last Dance and commit the city of Clearwater to provide local financial support, local match, not to exceed $10,000, which is 10% of the eligible tax refund upon certification by State of Florida Department of Economic Opportunity, and adopt Resolution 2020. Ms. Sanders.
Good morning, Denise Anderson, Director of Economic Development and Housing. We had the opportunity to briefly discuss the state's qualified target industry tax refund program during one-on-one phone calls last week. I thank you for that time. The agenda memo provides a great deal of information about the program and the local match contribution being requested, so I won't spend time today reviewing that program or the specific of the request, except to say that Project Last Dance, which is the code name used for this project, is expected to qualify for up to $100,000 in state qualified target industry tax refunds over a period of 8 years. And should the company meet and maintain the job creation and wages requirement of the program, the company will have a tax, and should the company have a tax burden equal to or greater than the refund, they will receive all of those funds from the state. The company is about Project Last Dance. The company is an advertising technology company focused on building industry-leading software and data as service technology platforms known as
sauce and DOS in the tech industry. They'll be supporting local, national, and global brands by providing them leading edge marketing and advertising solutions. And I'll quote from its application because I really have no idea what this means, but it's a suite of artificial intelligence powered data and software solutions that provides marketers with the tools and expertise needed to orchestrate omni-channel programs seamlessly. Currently employing 4 people at its Clearwater location, the company intends to hire 10 new, highly skilled and technical employees from the area in the first year, and a total of 20 over the 5-year period. The company stated in its application that it is committed to collaboration in the community and will continue to be part of the local startup and entrepreneurial scene. As with all projects considered for incentives, staff conducted an analysis of the $10,000 local match incentive. Over the job creation and payout period, we found the following. In addition to the 20 direct jobs that the company will hire, the project will generate 13.4 spin-off jobs, and the economic modeling shows that over a 10-year period, the city will be receiving a net benefit with a rate of return of 71.2% and a payback period of 1.5 years. Finally, funding for the incentive is available in the city's economic development QTI program account, but any future year allocations that may be necessary will be handled in budgeting. Happy to take any questions.
This has always been a great way to leverage dollars. Councilmember Bunker. There you go.
I do, yes. I do appreciate the time you spent with me on the phone talking about this. And I understand that we can't know the identity of the company that's actually applying for it, even as council members. How often is that the case?
It does occur rather frequently under Florida law, statute 288075. Any economic development projects in negotiation may execute confidentiality so long as they meet statutory requirements. This project did so. So you'll find that that happens quite often. As a matter of practice in our office, we typically assign a code name simply because it's easier for us to refer to that project by code name alone. But this particular company did execute confidentiality and we're obligated to hold that under penalty of law.
Very good. And from my discussions with you, it seems like a good investment. So I'm not too bothered by that. Thanks.
Thank you.
Other questions from council members? Seeing none, item 3.3.
Approve Clearwater's Back to Business Grant and Professional Services Program and adopt Resolution 2021. Ms. Sanderson again.
Thank you, Denise Sanderson, Economic Development and Housing Director. So council, we had some time as well last week to talk about this program, and for council members Beckman and Hamilton, I apologize. This did change a little bit from our discussion on Thursday, but I think in the end we end up with a much better program that is easier for us to manage overall. So this is my proposal for Clearwater's Back to Business Grant and Professional Services Program. We brought this to you in concept on April 16th, and following direction provided that evening, we bring it to you in this current form. Bear with me just a moment. Bear with me, a little technical difficulty here. I think you've got pause on another screen down below. There we go. No, it's paused.
Maybe the person was presenting before you. Yeah.
Let's take a 5-minute recess. I need to use the restroom anyway, so I'm going to evoke that privilege, and we'll let you get the presentation up.
Great, thank you so
There
much.
you go.
This program, we will be utilizing only the CDBG funds that Chuck Lane just described moments ago. The request for today is for Thursday is a $3.5 million general fund reserve. It will be allocated to eligible brick and mortar businesses only, as I said, and will be reimbursed up to the extent possible by other sources of funds, which may include CRA and DDB funds and any other funds should they become available, including federal or otherwise. CRA and DDB funds, however, must be approved by their respective boards at future meetings. The $500,000 in CDBG approximately of CDBG COVID funds, or CD funds, as we call them here, will be prioritized for home-based businesses. Any remaining funds will be allocated to brick and mortar establishments. In terms of eligibility, qualifying businesses must have a Clearwater business tax receipt for the current year, and business operation must be located within the incorporated limits of the city of Clearwater. They must have 1 to 25 full-time equivalent employees, including the owner, and full-time employees or equivalent employees are calculated at a rate of 1,000 total employee hours per month, per week. Operating since at least October 2019 is also a consideration and still open on February 29th, 2020. We expect to return to, business should expect to return to full operation within a reasonable period of time once the pandemic has passed. For businesses that have already applied for or received funding from county, state, or federal programs, they are still eligible to receive funding under this program. However, the grant funds must cover expenses not already covered by those programs. In terms of eligible business types, this mirrors very closely those that Pinellas County has identified as well. They include public food service establishments, bars, pubs, and nightclubs, non-essential businesses, which are detailed on Section 5 of the Safer at Home order. And for Thursday night, I will attach this as an exhibit to the item. Short-term lodging and vacation rental management companies, as well as places of public assembly. The ineligible business types include publicly traded companies, nonprofit corporations, businesses with code enforcement liens, and an active sentence for financial mismanagement. Those are felony sentences. In terms of the application process, we hope to make this very easy and very similar to the county program. We're using Neighborly software, which is the software that the county is using, and we've been able to receive a copy of that. And so our goal is to create very much the same sort of look and feel to the document that others are accessing today with the county. Applicants will submit an application using the digital online portal, as I've mentioned, and they'll need to document their business location, status, and employee count as of February 29th. They must demonstrate recent business income and expenses. And for those brick and mortar businesses who choose to pursue the professional services, which again results in a $2,000 grant upon completion, they'll need to select those professional services. This is the These professional services must be selected for home-based businesses in order for home-based businesses to receive any grant. They'll need to digitally sign and attest that all information is truthful, and the process should take about 15 to 20 minutes to apply. In terms of receiving the grant, the brick and mortar businesses must submit the application. City will review it for eligibility within 5 business days, and then a $3,000 check will be issued. Forgive the busyness of this slide, but for processes for receiving professional services, the business submits that completed application. Staff will review it for eligibility. We'll refer the business to the nonprofit partner agency, which will include both Prospera and Tampa Bay Black Business Investment Corporation, as well as Amplify Clearwater. The agency will match the business to the professional service providers. It can be a combination of providers up to $1,000. And the business completes that program. It should require a minimum of 4 hours and probably 8 hours of professional support. All of these fees are to be paid by the city, and then the city, once completed service documentation is received by our office, will process the grant, which again is up to $2,000 for home-based businesses or a flat rate $2,000 for brick and mortar. Keeping in mind that this program is really intended to support long-term business recovery, applicants should not expect immediate payment of funds because of that professional services program requirement, but partner agencies and staff will endeavor to expedite to the extent that we're able. So in summary, the brick and mortar program provides up to $6,000 in grants and services, and the home-based program is up to $3,000 in grants and services. Funding distribution, and this is a bit of a guess here. We certainly will do all that we can to maximize funding opportunities, but the applications will be reviewed on a first completed application, first served basis until all funds are expended. And once an applicant is deemed eligible for professional services, the city will reserve the subsequent grant funds. Should someone not complete those professional services, we'll of course reallocate. Under CDBG rules, all CDBG CV funds must be expended by December 31, 2020. And so we've aligned this completion date for this program for professional services to that date as well. Although I anticipate that we will be expending these funds well ahead of that deadline. Happy to take any questions.
Any questions for Ms. Sanderson? Councilmember Hamilton.
Thank you. I guess my question here is the only part about this program that kind of scares me is the $3 million out of reserve. I'm wondering if I'm interested to see how the process goes. Would it be possible for us to maybe cut that number in half down to like 1.5 million to see how the progress goes and how effective this is? Because like I said earlier, I'm always, I want to help, but I want to, I don't want this to be a Band-Aid that only keeps the business operating for a small amount of time before it doesn't survive. As in, usually when we're spending in reserve money, it's for an absolute necessary program, and it's money that we get a somewhat of an ROI on. I want to make sure, this is like investing money. I want to make sure I'm investing it in the right place and with the right companies so that we get the biggest bang for our buck. So I'm wondering, can we start out with a smaller number, see how it progresses, see how effective it is, and if we ultimately need to put a little more money into it, we can do it at a later date. And if anybody's agrees with that approach.
So I'm not sure.
You want to address that first?
Pardon me?
Go ahead.
I wasn't sure if there was actually a question in there, so forgive me for my hesitation. Certainly, the council has the ability to approve whatever amount of funding they wish to do so. And in fact, should they not choose to approve general fund reserve allocation. We will continue with the COVID funds as described, although we would likely include brick and mortar establishments for those COVID funds. And so we would resort just simply to the professional services program, and no grant awards would be offered. In terms of the use of general fund reserve, I'll leave to Pam to describe the legal use of those and the public benefit that will be derived. And then if Pam, when you're done describing that, I'll share sort of my economic development perspective on how we look at these funds and whether or not an ROI is received.
Ms. Aiken?
We did take a look at the legality of this, and what will be key is the findings that the council makes as to public benefit. So if you look at the resolution, which is attached to your agenda packet, it outlines certain findings that you will be making to determine that this is appropriate use of the city funds. So you will find that there is a public benefit as well as a public need, and there are a number of specific findings that you will be making.
And so when I look at it through the economic development lens, there are 3 criteria in which we always evaluate a project. One is the direct job creation, or in this case, perhaps the retention of direct jobs. One is the indirect or spin-off jobs. It often can be viewed as economic activity that creates those. And so would this program, would we be generating economic activity? Certainly it's intended that these $3,000 grant funds to brick and mortar would be used to pay vendors, some of those things. And so keeping that economic activity going. But that is certainly the premise of the professional services program as well, is to generate economic activity, not only for those service providers, but through the administrative fees we'll be providing to those nonprofit corporations that I mentioned. They'll also be able to pull in some additional funds and presumably retain some of their staff as a result. And then finally, we look at the ROI, and what that means is, does the city gain any benefit from this? And while it's very difficult to tell for all the reasons you've just mentioned, Mr. Hamilton, we can assume that many businesses will in fact be saved by this. And so we can assume perhaps that we will have fewer vacant buildings as a result, and the city hopefully will see at least a net neutral on the expense in terms of the ad valorem we will continue to receive, because the value of those structures will remain intact.
Other questions, comments? Thank you, Denise. I have to say, this is similar to the other item. We are making decisions on how to allocate dollars, and whatever we spend here is not going to be in reserves and will not be able to be used for some other priority. I understand Councilmember Hamilton's concerns that this may not be enough money. I hope it'll make enough of a difference and that we're qualifying people. That's something Ms. Sanderson and I talked about at length. I'm also hoping that there is probably going to be another CARE Act expenditure that may go down to cities our size. My understanding is the county got 170 million. They're using 35 million of that in a program that opens today that I would encourage anybody listening who would be entitled to go to the county's website and apply for that grant. I am disappointed that the money is not filtering down to cities like St. Pete, Clearwater, Largo, where we have a large business population that, we know how to help them. But I am hopeful that we will get some money to reimburse the general fund down the road. But we'll see. At some point, the federal government also has to stop printing money. So we'll see. But I will be supporting this on Thursday. Any other questions or comments? Seeing none, item 4.1. Thanks, Ms. Sanderson.
Thank you.
Mayor, were you still going to take that break or what?
Do you want one? Yes, let's take a 5-minute break. It'll save my kidneys. All right, looks like we have everybody back. Joel, can you tell me that we are ready to roll? You're muted. Just give me the cue when you're ready. All right, we will reconvene the May 4th work session. We are on item 4.1.
Thank you. Approve a utility work by highway contractor agreement with the State of Florida Department of Transportation to remove natural gas mains during a road improvement project on US Highway 19 and Horn Boulevard at an estimated cost of $4,840 and authorize the appropriate officials to execute same. Mr. Langill.
Good morning, Brian Langill, Assistant Director for Clearwater Gas System. This is a road construction project with the Florida Department of Transportation, and it's at the intersection of Horn Boulevard and US Highway 19 in Clearwater. We have about 220 feet of gas main that's in conflict with this project, and we are requesting to enter into this agreement with the FDOT for them to do the removal of our abandoned gas line. We will actually reroute our lines before the construction project starts, and then they will be responsible for removing and abandoning the old pipe. Be happy to take any questions.
Any questions? Consent? Item 4.2.
Approve a utility work by highway contractor agreement with the State of Florida Department of Transportation to remove natural gas mains during a road improvement project on US Highway 41 at an estimated cost of $52,800 and authorize the appropriate officials to execute same. Mr. Langill again.
Thank you. This is an identical agreement with the FDOT. It's just a different location. This is up in Pasco County on US 41 and just south of State Road 52. And excuse me, this is 4,000 feet of gas mains that's in conflict. So the contractor would, with the FDOT, would remove this pipe during their construction project, and we would actually put our new line in before their project starts.
Any questions for Mr. Langill? No. Consent? Item 5.1.
Approve a proposal by construction manager at risk Coors Construction Inc. of Pinellas Park, Florida in the amount of $175,187.59 for the renovations and replacement of the Pier 60 Bayhouse grinder pump pneumatic injector system and authorize the appropriate officials to execute same. Mr. Cater.
Morning, Mayor, council members. Art Cater, Interim Parks and Recreation Director. The item that you have before you today involves the replacement of the sanitary lift station at Pier 60 Baithouse. The Pier 60 Baithouse, or the renovations, occurred back in 1994. That's been in place for over 25 years now. We are having issues where there are some odors in the actually the baithouse. We have been dealing with them the best we can. However, it is time to replace the lift station. If you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer them.
Questions for Mr. Cater?
No.
Consent?
Yes.
Thank you, sir. 6.1.
Approve the request from the owner of property addressed as 2850 Sunstream Lane, Clearwater, to vacate a portion of a platted utility easement described as a part of Track C drainage area, Sunstream subdivision, according to the plat thereof as recorded in Plat Book 143, pages 65 through 69 of the Public Records of Pinellas County, Florida, and pass the appropriate ordinance on first reading. Ms. Kivett.
Thank you, Mr. Horn, and good morning, Mayor and council members. I'm Tara Kivett, Engineering Director. The property owner requested the city vacate a portion of a platted utility easement to allow construction of an entrance sign for this new subdivision. No city utilities are located in this easement. Staff has reviewed this vacation request and have no objections. Any questions?
Any questions for Ms. Kivett? All right, we'll talk about that further on Thursday, 6.2.
Approve the local mitigation strategy developed for Pinellas County and adopt the appropriate resolution. Appropriate resolution. Ms. Kessler.
Good morning, Mayor, council members. My name is Sarah Kessler, lead environmental specialist in the engineering department. This resolution is for the adoption of the local mitigation strategy, also referred to as the LMS. The object of the LMS is to develop a blueprint intended to provide unified and consistent course of action needed to eliminate and reduce the impact of disasters that threaten all of the municipalities in Pinellas County. Potential mitigation projects are also included in the LMS. Several Clearwater projects are on the list, including a few public utility projects. Public Utilities was able to apply for the hazard mitigation grant program after Hurricane Irma because of the projects that were on this mitigation list. City emergency management and planning divisions had opportunities to review and comment on the document prior to the final version. The final version is located online at pinellasLMS.org if anybody wants to look at the full document. This plan is updated every 5 years, and I'm happy to take any questions.
Any questions for Ms. Kessler? Councilmember Beckman.
Ms. Kessler, Sarah, do you, who works with the city? Do we have a city representative that works with this county group?
I am the main liaison. Our emergency manager, Javon Graham, is also on the group, and Lauren Matsky is an alternate for our group and represent the city and the city's interests in this group.
Oh, okay. So one of the questions I have annotated on the document attached to the agenda is, if the purpose is to develop a blueprint of action to eliminate or reduce the impact of disasters that threaten Pinellas County and its municipalities, does it include taking action to reduce greenhouse gas emissions and to restrict or eliminate building in flood zones or right on the water, those kinds of things? Because I know it mentioned it's hard to quantify or just, to really, I guess, quantify human behavior as contributing to that. But do you guys ever discuss those types of things when you're developing that plan?
Yes, those are issues discussed. Flooding and sea level rise are things that are included in the plan and are hazards that are identified in the plan.
So if you identify the hazards, do you guys discuss at all what individuals can do to reduce that impact? You know what I mean?
The plan does not discuss individual actions. It's more of what sort of projects will the city do to rectify those problems and mitigate those hazards. And so that's where these lists of projects comes in. That what actions does the city do, not an individual.
Okay. And would committing to like renewable energy goals or reducing our carbon footprint, would those things fit into that as far as reducing the hazard?
It probably wouldn't be directly related, but it would be related. It would be related to it. So by reducing our greenhouse gas emissions, we are helping with sea level rise. So if there are actions that the city could take, we could potentially put those on a mitigation list and have that related to a sea level rise and elimination of that hazard or mitigation of that hazard.
Okay, thanks.
Other questions, comments? 6.3. You're muted, Mr. Horn.
Approve change order 1 to Waterfront Engineering Inc. of Tampa, Florida for $51,469 for the 2019 city seawall project, increasing the contract from $254,710.50 to $306,179.50, and authorize the appropriate officials to execute same. Ms. Kessler.
Good morning again, Sarah Kessler, Engineering Department. This change order is for the seawall project. This change order for the seawall project is for an additional seawall location, Hamden Drive and 3rd Avenue. This site was identified as having voids behind the seawall after a resident contacted the city with turbidity concerns in front of the seawall. So I'll be happy to answer any questions.
Questions for Ms. Kessler? Are we raising any of the seawalls as we go in and put new cap and replace?
At this time, we are not raising the seawall anything above like the level of a new cap. So it would be 6 inches or so, we may raise them. We will, after the first of the year, we'll probably start surveying the seawalls again, just to see what their condition is, because it's been a little while since we've done that. And so at that time, we'll assess whether seawalls need to be raised. We don't want to raise them if the adjacent property owners haven't raised theirs necessarily, just because that's going to cause additional erosion issues. So it really has to be a comprehensive plan to figure out which specific walls need to be raised and how to do that so we don't create additional problems.
Aren't there ways though to mitigate that? Because you're never going to have the entire waterfront of the city do their seawalls simultaneously. That's right. Impossible.
Mm-hmm. We can just raise it incrementally. We just don't want to raise something 3 feet, above the adjacent property owner, but we could raise it a foot. And so we just need to compare like what an appropriate height is to raise the seawall to make sure that we don't compound a problem.
Councilmember Albritton, I think, is spending a lot of money at his house to redo his seawall.
I did. It's completed, and I did raise it 1 foot. And it actually is almost cheaper to raise it a foot because you don't have to take out the old cap. You just go over the top of it. So the only difference is they have to go back a little bit on the returns if your neighbor has not done that, to make sure that there's no erosion on there. But I would recommend highly that if we're going to be replacing seawalls, that we do, give it a little extra height to it. Just makes sense to me. It doesn't make sense to keep it the way they were built in 1960,
Is that something we can talk about, Ms. Kessler, going forward? Because that's how I feel. I mean, we ought to be starting to spend a little bit of money on prevention. This could be a 30-year process, but when we get a marginal storm, it could be the difference between a property flooding and not flooding. And over time, we can get to a higher level. Councilmember Hamilton.
Yeah, I think when you look at the project, if you're going to do it and you're going to raise it 6 inches, to raise it another 6 inches doesn't double the cost. You're only talking about basically the cost of the additional concrete, because you're still going to have the tiebacks. You're still going to have, the other expenses. You're talking about, it's basically just more concrete, little rebar. So I would say, and correct me if I'm wrong, Dave, but raising it a foot probably wasn't a whole lot more expensive than if you'd have just gone 6 inches.
No, the seawall was not. It did cost me a little more because I had to raise the grade of my backyard, right, and then resod. So that additional cost, but the seawall cost was. I mean, they didn't have to take out the old cap. They just ended up putting a new cap on top of it and then, pouring over it. So.
Right.
Would this contract have the ability for an amendment?
Yes.
Ms. Kessler?
Yes, it would.
I think I'm hearing support for looking into what the incremental cost would be.
Okay.
This is Bill. I also think we may want to also take a look at what kind of engagement do we need to have with the property owners? If we're going to start doing this, and we've already identified some potential impacts on adjacent property owners, it may be just as good for us to look at this in a little broader context. You know, how do we communicate this to the community so that no one is surprised, you know, when we start to do it?
So how would you like to move forward on this? Consent, or talk about it a little bit more on Thursday? I don't know if that's going to give you time to get us any additional data.
Can I just, this is the last site on this particular contract, and we are having definite erosion issues with this particular contract, or with this particular site. And so I think this would be a very easy thing to look at for our next contract, but maybe, yeah, just include it on the next contract of raising the seawalls and assessing that.
How many lineal feet again is this?
This is about 100 feet of seawall.
What's your all's pleasure? Do you want to delay it, go forward and not raise it as much?
Well,
Councilmember Albritton.
let me ask you this. So this is an add-on to an existing contract that we approved for, it was more than 2 or 3 seawalls. I think there were various seawalls throughout.
Yes.
Have that work already been started on the rest of them?
They have been started, and once we just have 2 more sites remaining of that existing contract.
Oh, you've got 2. Okay, you've got 2 sites left.
Will there be a penalty for delay?
No. We just want to make sure we deal with the erosion issue.
Yeah.
Night.
Well, it may be helpful to have some information Thursday if you want to discuss it from the company, if you could do that. Maybe there's something that we're not thinking of, but.
So let's hold this over till Thursday. Okay. Item 7.1.
Well, Mayor, before we move on, so what is it, what information do you want to hear about on Thursday?
Is there the opportunity to mitigate the erosion issues, understanding that there would be an extra expenditure, but as long as we're doing this, I think it is judicious to raise the seawall 12 inches rather than 6. I mean, at some point you just have to decide that's the direction you're going to go in. And I would rather delay this if there's some COVID issues with getting the contractor out there, or, you know, it takes us another council meeting to approve this. I think the right time to start is now. When do you want to plant a tree? 20 years ago, second best time today. That's kind of how I feel about this item.
Yeah. I just wanted to be clear what kind of information you all were expecting from us. That's fine. Sarah, you don't see any problem with that, do you?
No, I'll try my best to get the engineer out there prior to Thursday so we can get the answers.
Okay. All right.
If we can't, we'll just push it to the next meeting.
Okay.
Thank you. Item 7.1.
Approved settlement of Department of Environmental Protection, DEP versus City of Clearwater, OGC file number 20-0100 for an in-kind project in the amount of at least $80,388.96, and authorize the appropriate officials to execute same. Mr. Porter.
Good morning, everyone. David Porter, Public Utilities Director. I come to you this morning to ask you for the authority to execute an agreement with the Florida Department of Environmental Protection to settle an agreement with them in the way of doing an in-kind project. The in-kind project, as Mr. Warren said, would be at least $80,338.96. I want to thank all the council members for taking the time last week to meet with me individually over the teleconference to discuss this issue. So with that, I'll answer any questions that anyone may have.
Thank you for your individual meetings, Mr. Porter. Councilmember Albritton has a question.
Mr. Porter, could that, I know we already approved a project for manhole cover rims. Is that something we could offset the cost of with that project?
Okay, so one of the conditions of doing a project like this as an in-kind project is it has to be a project that's not already underway. So it has to be a project that's in addition to the work that we're doing already, and it has to be some way related to mitigating any issues with infiltration and inflow, and which causes SSO. So it would have to be something different.
Well, I tried.
It was a good thought. Anyone else?
I do.
Councilmember Beckman.
I just wanted to take the opportunity to say thank you to Mr. Porter for his long, thoughtful, detailed conversation with me. And I know I have a lot of supporters that care about our environment, as everyone here does. And so I just wanted to articulate some of the information that Mr. Porter shared with me about the articulated spills, in that one of them was a larger one was related to a power outage with a Duke Energy power outage and a pump, and that we report every single spill, even the small ones that are not required. And so and correct me if I'm wrong, but when a certain number of these spills build up, then the Environmental Protection Agency puts forth a fine or a penalty, and that we've decided, rather than paying that penalty, that we will incur more expenses to do some kind of in-kind project, and that you're thinking that our in-kind project is going to relate to some of these areas that were weak spots where the spills happened. So I think that,
correct.
Okay, so I think that makes perfect sense. And you know, in speaking to some of my, I have a great friend resident who is a former federal environmental protection agency investigator, and said these things do happen, and that we do have an aging infrastructure, and it will never be perfect, but that we can work very hard to fix these and prevent them from happening.
You're absolutely correct.
Okay, and it'll just be interesting to see. You're going to bring to us what that in-kind project is, and it'll stay close to that 87,000 something. It's not going to be astronomically high.
No, if we can put together a project that is actually going to be a meaningful project and really accomplish the goals that we're trying to achieve with the value of $80,338, we'll do so.
Okay, and it has to be completed within we have to propose something within 180 days, or has it be completed?
We actually need to propose it very quickly. I think it's within 60 days, and then we've got about 120 days to work with DEP for them to vet that proposal. Okay. But then as soon as they vet it, we've got 180 days to complete the project.
Great, thank you.
Any other questions?
One comment, Councilmember Beckman, we would not necessarily bring that project back to the council. We would make you aware of it, and individually. So
okay,
I just want to make that clear.
Thank you.
Councilmember Bunker, did you have a question?
Not a question. I just wanted to again thank David for the detailed explanation that he gave each of us leading up to this meeting here. It was a thorough explanation, and I think the fact that the city is spending more money to actually address the problem rather than just paying a fine is the right thing to do.
Very good. Consent?
Yes.
Yep.
8.1.
Thank you very much.
Item 8.1.
Yes, that's Pam.
Second.
Good morning, Mayor. Item 8.1 is request for authority to settle the case of Clearwater versus Ginelli et al., case number 19-1896. And I believe that Mr. Fuino is in the staff space.
Yes.
Thank you, Ms. Aiken. Good morning, Mayor, members of council. Michael Foligno, Assistant City Attorney. This agenda item requests authority to settle a code enforcement lien foreclosure against a commercial property. The property has been brought into full compliance with the city's codes. The settlement offer is to settle for $100,000, in which case the city will dismiss the case, satisfy certain code enforcement liens for violations on that property, and partially release the property from other code enforcement liens on different properties. And with that, if you have any questions, I'm happy to answer them.
Questions from the council?
I'm sorry? Oh, no.
Any hands?
No.
Consent?
Yes.
Okay. Item 8.2.
Approve renewal of legal services agreement with Bryant Miller Olive for a 3-year period to act as bond counsel and authorize appropriate officials to execute same. Council, this is our renewal of our bond counsel agreement. Are there any questions on this?
Any questions? They've been a great firm for us for many years with a tremendous reputation. So consent?
Yes.
Yes.
8.3.
Approve renewal of a legal services agreement with Neighbors, Giblin, and Nickerson to serve as disclosure counsel for a period of 3 years beginning May 15th, 2020, and authorize the appropriate officials to execute same. Council, this is the disclosure counsel for our bond issues. This is also an additional period of time for them. They have been our bond counsel, our disclosure counsel for several years now.
Any questions? See none, consent?
Yes.
Item 8.4.
Mayor, that is a second reading ordinance.
Yes, it is. All right. Any questions on that? 8.5. This is just renewing our emergency proclamation.
Yes, sir.
Which we will take care of on Thursday. City manager verbal reports.
Thank you, Mayor. This agenda item deals with solid waste recycling complaints related to COVID-19. We have provided you with, or at least Joelle provided you with some reports that kind of chronicled some of the complaints we received. And also, I believe Mr. Gloucester is available. And Earl, would you just kind of summarize, kind of where we are today, and then the mayor, I think, has some thoughts that he'd like to share. Go ahead.
Good morning, Earl Gloucester, Director of Solid Waste General Services. Well, today I'm happy to report that we resumed our collections of yard waste and bulk items. Effective at 7 o'clock this morning, we began that process. So all the complaints should die down now that we're back on the streets and collecting those materials. As you know, we suspended that process on April 10th so that we could determine how we would better be able to protect our employees working in close quarters. We wanted to ensure that we were able to protect them from contracting this coronavirus. So now that we put some other things in place, we felt confident in being able to bring them back to work and begin that process again today. Questions?
Any questions for Mr. Gloucester? Councilmember Beckman.
I just wanted to say I appreciate all that the solid waste people do for our city, and I am concerned about the employees who are in the truck handling bulk items, because I don't think it's particularly safe to do so. It's not following the CDC guidelines, and I just, I want to go on the record that I'm concerned about that.
Mr.
I don't
Gloucester,
know if there's anything
go ahead.
Well, I don't know if there's anything we can do as a city to, acknowledge that. I don't know, pay wise or other ways, but it's a significant, it's a risk to be closer than 6 feet for 8 hours a day in and out of that vehicle, touching property that somebody else has touched.
What we've done to address that, I mean, it's the nature of our business. We're not going to be able to completely comply with those CDC guidelines. It's simply the nature of our business. We're ensuring that everyone has a mask as they go out and that they wear the mask during the course of the day. They have gloves, already leather gloves that they have. And we're, in the cab of the truck, there is some distance, but not a lot, but they're supposed to they're been instructed to wear the mask while they're in the truck, close to each other. And there were some trucks where we had 3 people in a cab. We've reduced that to 2. And now we have a person in a chase truck that gets out when there's large piles and they help to load the trucks. So we're doing our part. We're doing what we can to mitigate where we can, because we know that we can't be in compliance and do our job.
So a lot of the time, Mr. Gloucester, the workers are on the back of the truck, right? It's when they actually leave one neighborhood to go to another
Yes,
that
sir.
they're in the cab together.
Yes, sir, in transit.
Okay.
Unless it's raining, they're not riding on the back of the truck on a rainy day, are they?
If it's pouring down rain or really hard rain, yes, they're instructed to pull to the side of the road, sit in the cab of the truck and wait it out.
Otherwise, they're getting on and off the truck from the rear end.
Yes, sir.
Almost continuously.
Yes, sir.
I mean, we've received a lot of emails. I think everybody is uncomfortable with recycling materials, being mixed with the rest of the garbage. But the reality is that's going to change now. And we still have picked up everybody's trash, be it recyclables, trash, yard waste. Everything has still been collected. So the question is, council, have we failed to give the service that was promised? It may not have been given in as timely a manner as everybody is accustomed to in the city of Clearwater, because I think we have the finest solid waste department in the county by far. But the reality is that all of the waste was in fact picked up. And so do you believe that we ought to be rebating people? I talked to some who said, I have a $3, on my bill, it's $3.11 for recyclables. Those were still taken away. The citizen didn't have to deal with them. It didn't go into the normal waste stream as they expected, but I think we need to ask philosophically if we believe that a rebate is due. And my stance is no. We were also still paying our employees, which is important that we've all kept them economically stable and hopefully they're spending money. So I'd love to hear everybody's point of view. Vice Mayor?
Yeah, I've had a lot of people contact me about that. The city does a good job of services, and like you said, they've always picked it up, even though they've mixed it, or the trash truck is picking up recycling. But a lot of that wasn't our fault. I mean, it was because Tampa wasn't taking recycling, and then we didn't want to spend the extra money to take it all the way down to Sarasota. That doesn't make any sense. So I tell my people that are concerned about it, look, at least we're getting some recycling on it. We're sending it to the incinerator and they're making electricity out of it, okay? So it's something that's not going to last a long time. And looks like we're getting back this week to normal. So everybody's in this together. Everybody needs to understand that, and we're doing the best we can. So that's my 2 cents.
Thank you, sir. Other comments or questions? Councilmember Hamilton?
Well, I guess all I can really say is I agree with you as far as no rebates or anything, because it's still gotten picked up. Now, as far as once it's picked up and taken away from their home, the decision not to do the recycling side of it and send it all to the incinerator that's a decision we have to make economically to be prudent with the taxpayers' money. And so we do that. We've made that decision. And given the pandemic, it's given everybody a lot more opportunity, a lot of people a lot more opportunity to do some projects that they've been putting off. And yes, there's been more yard waste down at the street. Now, picking up the yard waste, my understanding, and correct me if I'm wrong, if somebody's a health expert out there, but if that yard waste is put out on the street on Monday night, in the case of my neighborhood, if I put yard waste out on Monday night and it gets picked up Tuesday morning, any virus that may have been in contact with that waste has dissipated overnight. So handling of that is a very minimal risk. And our employees being close in proximity to each other during the day, using the masks, I think is proper protocol and whatnot. So I think the actual risk at doing this is very low, and I'm glad to see we're back in total operation.
Any other questions or comments?
Well, I'm not certain that the risk is low, but we are taking a lot of risk now as we start to open up the beaches and business. So that's just one more risk we're taking. I do want to ask now, you gave the example of $3 on your bill. Was it Mr. Hibbard that?
Yes.
Yeah. So is that typical for recycling?
That's the monthly bill for the recycling program, right, Earl?
That's correct.
And if we were to refund it to everybody, approximately how much would that cost?
We'd be $3 times.
That's 75,000.
Okay. How about if we refund it to those individuals who call in and say, hey, I'd like a refund? Not everyone's going to do that, but for those folks who are upset about this, can there be an easy process for our customer service people to go, okay, there's your $3. You got it coming back.
Councilmember Bunker, first of all, I wouldn't support personally us giving money back to only people who complained. Either we think it's right that everybody get rebated because we didn't provide a service that they were charged for, and that means everybody ought to get the money back. But my stance is those recyclables were taken away. Now, they didn't go into the recycling stream the way it normally does, but bottles, cans, newspaper, cardboard, they're not sitting at the residents' homes. We took it away. Their only gripe might be if you are committed to recycling that it didn't get recycled. And I think under the circumstances, it's understandable. If this were going to be ongoing for the next 6 months, then I think I'd definitely relook at charging a recycling fee. But again, as I said, we didn't stop paying employees, and we still picked up all the waste.
Yeah.
So we can have a motion on Thursday if you really feel strongly about that, but I will not be supporting it.
Well, I'm just looking at it as a consumer dealing with bills from companies generally. If somebody, takes the step to say, well, here's $3 back, you go, oh, I really like them. And it would be nice if the people of Clearwater who are upset could go, oh, at least they gave me $3 back. But I understand your points, and I'm not going to push it. I just wanted to check how costly that would be. That's all.
Mayor, this is Bill. If I could make a comment, just to remind everyone, during hurricane season, and when you can think of how many hurricanes we've had over the last 20 years, there are times when we have had to suspend normal municipal delivery service. Now, hurricane season, I mean, the hurricane event isn't as long as what we're experiencing under COVID-19, but nevertheless, we suspended the activity. We still caught up and removed everything. You will always have some people who feel like if you miss a pickup, you ought to refund them. But we didn't get, we typically did not have a lot of people complaining when we had to do that. But to the mayor's point, if we find ourselves in a long, protracted situation that we know we're going to have difficulty providing the service as intended, then there's an opportunity for us to review it. Okay. But even the time frame that we're talking about with regard to COVID-19, at least I don't feel that it qualifies for that kind of consideration.
Fair enough.
Councilmember Beckman.
Just to be on the record, I agree with Councilmember Albritton. We've generated X amount of waste and X amount of recycles, and those things were picked up every single week. And to me, I wish my recycles went into a recycling facility, but they took it away and now they're resuming it. And any large bulk waste, yard waste, you store it for a while and now they're going to come and pick it up. So I would not be in favor of any refund. It's just the nature of the crisis and people doing their best.
Councilmember Hamilton, anything?
No, I'm good.
All right. I think we can move on from that item. Anything else to add, Mr. Horn?
No, Mayor.
Okay. Anything else, Ms. Aiken?
No, sir.
All right. Council discussion items. The first is 11.1, the Business Recovery Task Force recommendations.
Mayor, the intent here is just to make sure that it is an item that you can discuss on Thursday, but staff will be ready to discuss it on Thursday.
Are there any questions from council members that the staff should be prepared for? All right, well, we'll hear that on Thursday. Item 11.2 is improving state unemployment benefit system. Councilmember Beckman.
Thank you, Mayor. So I asked to put this on the agenda because I'm happy that we have Amplify working on a business recovery proposal that they're going to present on Thursday. We have the Clearwater Neighborhoods Coalition that's kind of worked together to offer suggestions on how we might best address the needs of our residents and neighborhoods. And I just feel that we as a city council, with the weight of that title behind us, can make a statement to our governor in support of improving our unemployment benefits, unemployment insurance program to better support our workers. And where Amplify is looking out for business owners, and those positive actions will hopefully trickle down to our workers, and CNC's looking out for our neighborhoods and residents, I think we need to speak for our workers. And so I've composed a draft of a letter to send to our governor, articulating, it simply says that as members of our city council, we feel that our state has inadequate unemployment benefits program, and the distribution of that program needs to be improved. And so, I have a paragraph that talks about how tourism makes up a significant part of Clearwater's economic base, that we are speaking collectively on behalf of over 25% of our residents who work in our food, hospitality, and retail establishments, and addressing the fact that we have our $275 per week allowance is severely inadequate for our workforce. And just as concerning is we have the lowest number of weeks that pays out that unemployment. And even with our Amplify suggestions and what Ms. Sanderson is doing with our business recovery, the truth is we have a number of our residents who will be unemployed for a very, very long time, far longer than 12 weeks. And we do have a number of our businesses that are most likely to not come back and hire their full workforce. And so I think, you know, sending a letter from our city that urges the governor to take some specific actions. And I know he's taken some actions in the last couple of weeks, but, you know, I have articulated 4 steps to, you know, increase the maximum amount of payments and duration of unemployment benefits. And this may require some legislation, but it simply says that we are behind this. We recognize that our state truly is kind of an embarrassment nationally. The spotlight has been on it about the amount of our benefits and the duration. To update the formula to determine eligibility and consider a worker's most recent quarter of earnings so that that number 275 would increase. And then simply to investigate and mitigate challenges with the website and provide additional ways for individuals to apply for unemployment insurance. So I've talked to a number of our residents. How are you doing? Have you gotten your unemployment benefits? And if they don't get through the state system, they don't get that $600 through the federal system. So there are a number of people that have received none. And when I'm out there working in the, you know, at the food distribution, you know, those lines just get longer and longer. So I'm concerned, and I just think, I think it would be great if we could put forth a symbolic request, you know, to the governor that says the leadership in Clearwater is really concerned about our workers who earn, you know, a vast majority of them, you know, earn lower wages. Our, you know, our poverty rate and all that is, you know, not something to be celebrated.
Comments from the council? Councilmember Albritton.
Well, I just, I hadn't had really much time to go through and to digest the letter, but I do agree that we have a horrible system in Florida that very needs, they need to revamp the whole system, because I know there's people out there that aren't getting, and it is attached to the federal. So if they can't get through the state, they aren't going to get their relief from the federal. So I guess my question would be to Pam on this, how we would, representing the city, what we would need, what would be the best way to send our concern about that to the governor?
Pam, you're on mute, but until you come off mute, I want to make a comment. There are some things in your letter, Councilmember Beckman, that I agree with. I have been in touch with all of our legislative delegation for Clearwater. And you know that I have been trying to help individuals as the requests come in. And all of the representatives have been very responsive to my requests. I might be able to support a letter on some of the levels and other things. I do not think it is necessary for us to point out that the system is broken. That has been so widely televised and in newsprint and everywhere else. And it was from a previous administration. Also, we are dealing with a tsunami of unemployment claims, unlike any system would be prepared for. So I'm always in support of sending letters to government above us for things we either support or things we oppose, but to point out that they're doing a poor job on something that is, in my opinion, at this point, common knowledge, doesn't really help. I mean, this is like having a national political convention and the Super Bowl all on the same weekend and having a hurricane evacuation. Our roads would never be able to handle that type of traffic, and neither can this system. I have asked Senator Hooper to come to our council meeting on Thursday, which he has agreed to do, and give a legislative update and an update on what is going on with the unemployment system. I've also talked to Representative Vala, and he has sent me some information that I forwarded to you this morning when I got it about how the system is improving. It is still broken. I do not disagree with that fact. And for anybody watching who's trying to apply, they need to quit putting in additional applications. They need to go and find the original application that they put in, because what they're finding is the system is crashing also because people are duplicating their application over and over again. So they'll have a single person that's put in 8 to 10 applications, which is blowing up the system. But Ms. Aiken, do you want to go ahead and comment?
Yes, sir. You have traditionally followed one of two methods, either having a resolution, which is passed by council with basically the same information that the letter would have, or a letter which is signed by all of you, or one that is signed by the mayor. So you can either do it by letter or by resolution.
Councilmember Beckman, you wanted to say something else?
I did. So, I appreciate you having our representatives come and speak with us, but and you did acknowledge that it is broken, but we just don't want to use that language in a letter. I mean, I can finesse the letter and put forth another draft, but your statement that our legislators are now saying not to reapply, I believe it was an article in this weekend's Tampa Bay Times where it said that the state Department of Economic Opportunity is saying you do need to reapply. They are urging people to reapply. So I might have my, information wrong, or I mean, I have it. Yeah, I mean, it said, on April 28th, the Tampa Bay Times reported that Department of Environment or Economic Opportunity is informing people who were deemed, quote, ineligible that they might indeed be eligible. They are telling people to reapply online. So
those are for the people that were ineligible, but there are also people that have not heard back that have been applying multiple times, and that is swelling the system. It's just what I was told directly by one of the representatives.
Okay. Okay.
Hopefully the senator can shine some additional light. I was told if they're calling the hotline that the best time to do it is between 2 and 5 o'clock p.m. That's when they have the least amount of traffic. So, I mean, I'm fine with tailoring a letter. I do not know what raising the allowances means overall. So when we put that language in without understanding what it does to the overall state budget, I'd want a little bit more information on that, because I don't know what we're actually asking for. What does that dollar amount look like? I will tell you one of the other things that was frightening is that the senator told me that there may be the necessity that employers double the payment that they are making for unemployment insurance to make up for the reserves that are being depleted right now, which unfortunately will probably result in employers employing fewer people. So there's a lot of unintended consequences and unknown consequences that I don't even think we're aware of yet. But, over the next several months, we will be made aware of. And do you just understand why I don't want to castigate another segment of government when they already know and have identified that there's a problem?
I do. And I'm not necessarily saying it is our current governor's, fault, but it hasn't been rectified since he's been in office. But and it is a tsunami of a crisis, and and all that, but it does bring to light, and changes need to be made, and minimally in responding to applicants like right now. If we're going to talk about raising $275 a week for 12 weeks, that's a conversation to be had in the future. But as far as addressing people actually getting through the system and getting their payments sent to them needs, whether he hires more staff or whatever they're going to do at the state level, they've got to take that action like yesterday.
Well, I think they are throwing significant money and people. I think the issue is they bought a very poor system.
Yeah.
Back in, I believe, 2011 was when it was purchased. Other comments or questions, Councilmember Hamilton, and then Councilmember Bunker.
I truly hope I don't step in it here, but truly, there's no question, nobody disputes, even at from the governor's office, that the unemployment process and the process that the state has is inadequate for the pandemic. However, the pandemic is something that no one could ever foresee the magnitude of something like this. Now, that being said, the 12-week unemployment, a lot of this stuff, when you look back before the pandemic started, when we were at full employment in this state. So 12 weeks of unemployment was probably sufficient because there were jobs available. That is not the case right now. So to change that 12-week just because of this pandemic, if you might want to make a temporary change to it, that's up to the governor and the state level to make that change. But but the other part that I want to make a point of, and I'm not meaning this, I don't mean it to be derogatory towards anyone or anything like that, but when you're talking, we are a hospitality industry driven state. Hospitality industry jobs are not all high wage jobs, but between what the federal government at $600 a week plus the state at $225 a week or $250 a week, whatever you get, to some hospitality positions, I don't want to see unemployment benefits become an incentive not to go back to work. I mean, that's not helping our industry. That's not helping our city. That's not helping our state. So, but I believe, the people that are unemployed due to this pandemic need the revenue. They need that money, and we need to be able to do it. But in the long term, again, I don't think unemployment should be an incentive not to go to work. That's the balance I'm trying to keep on my radar.
Councilmember Bunker.
Yes, well, I mean, there is a real feeling of hopelessness out there in the nation and here in Florida as to how are we just going to survive. And I know it's incredibly frustrating for people who can't even get the minimal unemployment benefits that they have coming to them. So I understand Kathleen's wish to urge the state to do more. Unfortunately, even I'm discovering now, even being elected to the council, that there's not a lot that we can do, it seems, to help individuals. Because I mean, I brought it up before, and I don't want to rehash this at all, but when we look at $64 million being spent on Imagine Clearwater, you just think, well, how can we use some of that money to help the people here in this city? I saw an email that was sent out to all of us, a news article from a small town, where the city government actually bought vouchers from the local restaurants to distribute to the citizens. And that was an idea that I had prior to, taking office. Is there some way we can work with church groups and nonprofits and figure out a way to match the hungry folks here in the city with the restaurants who want to survive? And I wish we could come up with something like that to help businesses and help the people in the community as well. So there's just this feeling that we've got to be able to do something. The $5,000 for the business incentive, yeah, that's a drop in the bucket. And yeah, the unemployment benefits go on for 12 weeks, but this pandemic is going to go on much longer. We're reopening businesses now. Well, we're not even meeting the guidelines of 2 weeks of deaths going down. They're increasing dramatically here in Florida. So it is frustrating having a sense of hopelessness from this position as well. And I think we need to come up with ways to actually respond to the citizens and try to help them. I know we can't give money to individuals, but some sort of program that can help, I think, is needed.
Councilmember Beckman.
So I think that this letter can be meaningful and symbolic, and a way to communicate to our workers that we hear you, we understand your frustrations. While we might not be able to help individually unless we know somebody and can pick up a phone and make a call, but we, generally we don't. And so I would, I don't know how we want to end this conversation, but can I do another draft, a couple of drafts that maybe doesn't use the word broken and is a little softer? I mean, is that what we do to go forward for Thursday, or how does that work?
I have not, first of all, you don't know me that well. We've kind of been on the campaign trail together, but you will learn I don't pull punches. I'm a pretty plain speaking person. And when I think it's necessary, I do, I'm pretty bold in my statements. At the same time, I understand that we will have to continue to work with our state on many issues. And so I'm always reluctant to be overzealous in criticizing, because there's the old statement, be careful the toes you step on. They may belong to the rear end that you may have to kiss down the road. I'm softening that statement, but I think we just need to be aware of that. And I'm fine if we are not criticizing directly something that the state has already identified is a problem. Okay. I mean, when I know we have a problem within the city, we identify it, we voice that it's a problem, we're going to find a solution to fix it. I don't need to be told again that we've got a problem. And I feel the same way for them. The only other issue I would have, Councilmember Beckman, is, do we want to put specifics in here about how the state ought to change their levels of compensation for workers? I don't know the fiscal impact of this recommendation. I'm very reluctant to make a recommendation when I don't even know what the impact is. I mean, I think that's just being reasonable for us to at least know that. And so I'm happy to do something to show workers that we care about them. We do care about them. I care about them. They're a part of our community. I know a lot of them are hurting. So I don't want to diminish their suffering. That is not what I'm saying. But at the same time, I just think we need to be thoughtful in the way that we do it. And also, Councilmember Bucker, one of the things, and I don't want to sound preachy, all the different levels of government have their lanes, have their responsibilities. There are certain areas that the city just doesn't get involved in. It's more of a federal or a state mandate that they, just like the state isn't going to get into solid waste or parks and recreation or police or fire coverage. That's a municipal responsibility. And when we're doing those types of activities, we're staying in our proper lane. And then there's some lanes we don't have the resources for, which I think goes back to, what we were talking about with aid to businesses. Is it enough to really make an impact? And is it our lane? I will tell you, we're deviating a little bit from our lane. It's on the borderline.
Yep.
I don't know how to do the letter Councilmember Beckman, this is one of the most difficult conversations we ever have amongst the council, because we can't sit in a room generally and wordsmith a letter to everybody's tastes.
Right.
Being a teacher, and you certainly understand how difficult that could be. Pam, maybe you can help us a little bit here, or Bill, with some recommendations.
Mayor, if you'd like, we can work with Councilman Beckman. You can either do this as a letter, or you can do it as a resolution, and then we can bring it to you and you can do some more wordsmithing on that. If you cannot agree on a letter, then the individual council person can send a letter, not as representing the city, but as an individual council person. But if you'd like, I think we kind of understand where the council is going. We can work with Councilman Beckman's letter to modify that. Do you want it in resolution form, or do you want to leave it in a letter?
I would prefer a letter.
Okay.
And I would prefer that we could reach consensus.
Okay.
So that it is actually coming from the entire council.
Okay.
Mr.
Mayor, this is Bill. Do you think there's any value in being in a position to modify the letter after you hear what Senator Hooper has to say? I'm just wondering whether whatever he shares may in some way impact kind of your message, based on his update.
I'll defer to Councilmember Beckman as far as her desire for a timeline.
Sure, I think that's reasonable to wait and hear. I mean, what I could do maybe is work with Ms. Aiken and come up with a proposed draft too. And then if we would need to change anything post the presentation on Thursday, I don't know what the timeliness of that process is. If we can, does it have to be done in public? The agreement to a letter and all that?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. Okay.
Those pesky sunshine laws.
Yeah, I know. It puts a glitch in things. Yeah. I can't imagine that they're going to say too much on Thursday that's going to have some big, miraculous change from today and the way things are going and the reporting and the stats for the weekend on April, at the end of April. So, I mean,
Well, what I'd like to do is I'd like to pass on your letter to the senator so that he can address the bullet points within it and make some clarifications. And then I think if you work with the city attorney, you can come up with some iterations that get us close enough that we can actually make some amendments on Thursday and get something done in a timely manner. Did you have something to add, Vice Mayor?
No, I just thought that'd be a good idea.
Okay. Any other questions or comments, Pam?
Clarification, Do you want to pass this on to Senator Hooper before Thursday night?
I would like to send this letter to him today
Okay.
so that he has the opportunity to chew on it between now and Thursday, and maybe give us some feedback even prior to that, so that we can finalize something on Thursday and get some resolution.
Thank you.
Does that sound reasonable
Yes, it
to
does.
everybody?
Yeah, that's a good idea.
Okay, perfect. Any other new business that people wanted to want added to future agendas? Anything else for the good of the order? Kathleen?
Yeah. So when our representatives are here on Thursday, what is their purpose? Just to give us an update on what's going on at the state level, and where will they come in the agenda, at the beginning, the end?
The senator is going to be the first presentation after citizens to be heard. He's going to give us an update on the legislative session that ended, and then specifically, I asked him to speak to the unemployment issues, the website, and all of the other ramifications. He will be over at the library to give the presentation. He said he would prefer coming in person rather than doing it via Zoom.
And then Mr. Latvala?
I did not invite him.
Oh, I thought he was coming too. No?
No, I have talked to him, and I have talked to Representative DeSiglia, who all pretty much carried the same message, which was they are pouring incredible amounts of money and manpower. I cannot remember the secretary that the governor has put on this, but he literally said he hasn't basically seen his family in 3 weeks. That might be hyperbole, but I have a feeling that's how they're dealing with this, is they're trying to rectify it as quickly as possible. But if it's a bad software program, which is what I am told it is, that's probably not going to be as easy to do. And I don't know that there's something they can take off the shelf and start fresh.
Thank you.
Okay, yes. So I don't have any closing comments other than to say the beaches are reopened. We are going to have our ambassadors out there. We have brought in temporary additional sinks for people to use to clean their hands and for proper hygiene. We would ask all of the people who are going to the beach, obviously, to follow social distancing, to follow heightened hygiene protocols, and as I've said, to use common sense and be respectful of our police officers and those ambassadors, because if you are not, we will ask you to leave. I want to thank Joelle Castelli and her whole team, because they've really done a dynamite job of communicating all the COVID information, our solid waste getting back online, and dealing with the media on the beach reopening. I really appreciate all you've done, Joelle. I think you've really done some major heavy lifting. So the more we can communicate with our citizens, businesses, and guests, I think the better off we're going to be. Anything else, Mr. Horn or Ms. Aiken?
Mayor, just one thing. I did send you all some photographs of the beach the police chief sent to me earlier this morning. So please take a look at those. Everything seems to be moving along very smoothly.
And this program works so much better. I think everybody can be pretty pleased with the way that this software is working. So thank you also to our IT folks. With that, we will adjourn the meeting. See you all Thursday. God bless.
Thank you.